can vote, or even if you can't vote. So if I can have people who want to stay in Europe, put their hands up. People who exit. And undecided. Okay, well, we'll do the same exercise after we've heard both speakers, just to get an idea of whether it's changed your mind or if it's given you the right idea of which way to go. So can I just introduce you to our first speaker? It's Nick Brown, who's Chair of the Chamber of Commerce for Welling and Hatfield, and he's going to talk to you about exiting Europe. And then once Nick is finished, we've got a lady, Kate Godfrey, coming in, who's going to represent staying in Europe. So Nick, over to you.
Yeah, morning. Can you all hear me okay? There's, yeah, I prefer not to use the microphone. So, that's me, Welling Hatfield Chamber of Commerce, as we try and look after local businesses and particularly help them get jobs, which, you know, I think is pretty important. I was going to do a similar thing. Does anyone think it doesn't matter? Just, we've done the previous two, but is there a feeling that, you know, it won't make any difference? Does anyone feel that way? Hands up, anyone feels that way? Good, just delighted to hear it. Because it does matter. You know, it's about our future, and it's about our understanding of the world in which you and your important vote in my lifetime, and I hope you won't have such important decisions to take in the future in your lifetime. I think it was one of the Chinese guys said that may you live in interesting times, and he meant live in a dangerous set of circumstances. And I think these are dangerous circumstances. For trying to sort that out. So I think this is a really telling graph. This is the amount of money that we owe. So two here. The first thing Tony Blair and Gordon Brown did was take control of lending from the banks, away from the banks, and give it to a bunch of bureaucrats and financial authorities. And they were clients of mine, and you know, I know them well, but they're not commercial people. They're bureaucrats. That's what they do. And the result of that is they just opened the flood taps and all the money, and people started spending money left, right, and centre, creating all kinds of jobs, creating all kinds of bureaucracy that tied all the firms up that generate the cash into knots. And this is the crux of the matter. There are certain people that generate money that pay for anything, and there are certain people that go around spending that money, building their own little empires to create bureaucracy that stops people doing that. And we have to, or perhaps more importantly, your generation and your children's generation, your lifetimes. It's happened in my lifetime. And I think that's really bad. An example of a big company jumping on the bandwagon of all of this is the Royal Bank of Scotland. We had to bail the Royal Bank of Scotland out for £45 billion, and no one went to prison. This is an example of unaccountable people stealing away their stuff. It's wrong. Okay? Austerity under the current government starts here, and the projections are that debt's going to carry on going up. So what I'm saying is quite that we pay on that debt as at 2015 is 52 billion. Okay? Now you may ask yourself the question, why is it the interest rates have been at an all-time low for the last 10 years? Well, the reason for it is very simple. Is at the moment we pay 0.41%. We used to pay 0.2%, what Germany pays, but when we moved this downgrading us from a AAA rating to an AAB rating, it doubled. Okay? Now that 52 billion if the interest rates were to go up to 2%, that would be 36% of our entire budget for education, for schools, for pensions, for looking after people. And that would be a disaster. That's the interest rates are so low. But what's actually been happening on interest rates since 1900 from 8%, you know, I bought my first flat in Chiswick here and watched them jump to 17.5%. To solve problems, to create these jobs in the public sector, is just going to create more and more stuff which will bring hyperinflation. This is coming back again. And here we are down here. This 2% here, I don't know if you So it's quite a serious set of circumstances that you are going to be inheriting and your families are going to be inheriting. The health service to do good stuff. I'm thinking of all the people that create more and more legislation for us. So I guess the question is, was all this extra cash, the area under the graph, was it well spent? Well, you know, here's an example, and I totally appreciate this is a straw poll of one, but as far as the health service is concerned, and my best friend Neil is head of health for West Midlands, he's the guy who stopped nurses getting fired for resigning on doctors. So, you know, that was a good thing to do, and he's very much against the whole bureaucracy side of the health service. But the bottom line is that the cost of the health service has tripled in that time as a percentage of GDP, and GDP has gone up by 3 as well. So the cost of the health service has gone up by 10 times what it cost in 1960. Well, my father's a GP, and the other day I went down to the doctors and said, can I have an appointment please? The doctor I wanted to see, who knows me, and they said, of course you can, could you wait 24 days for an appointment to go to the doctor? Okay? Back in, all the way through the 60s and 70s, if you phoned my father up and said, I'm not feeling very well at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd get out of bed and come and see you. You know, that's a fundamental difference to what's going on. Have we received good value out of this? I don't think that we have. And I see it wherever I look. You know, it's quite scary. So the question is, what can we do about it? And this comes to the point as to which way you should vote. And the answer is, there's only 2 things we can do. We can either radically reduce public sector expenditure, which people say they're doing, but they're not really, or we can export more. And you know, obviously the best solution is to do a bit of both of those things. But I think that the point is that a vote to remain in Europe is a vote for more bureaucracy and more bureaucrats. And this isn't a matter of choice. We have got to stop this increasing costs now. Otherwise it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and badly worse. So what can we do about it? Let's have a look at exporting more. Exporting more is about helping our medium-sized firms to innovate and export more. You know, we have the best education system in the world, we have the English language, we have all sorts of things going for us that can help us export all the way around the world. And yet we're allowing ourselves to have all kinds of restrictions put upon us. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We overtook France last year. We're fast approaching overtaking Germany. And you know, people across the world, they love our style, they love our freedom of speech, they love our ability to express ourselves, they love the innovations that we do. And we ran an event the other day down at Hall Park. Oaklands College put on a fashion show, and I was so impressed. You know, it was a world-class fashion show that you guys put on, and I've never seen anything so good. You know, I've been to a few fashion shows in my life. It was absolutely stunning, the things that were going on down there. I was really impressed. It was fantastic. So I think that there are 2 camps, and I'm going to ask you, you know, which camp should we all sit in at the end of this, which is really what it's about. I think there's the Brexit camp, the Leave Europe camp. These are people with self-belief. They're people who know how good they are. They're people who are open, people that you can trust. And I have to say, some of the stuff coming out of the government recently, the scaremongering stuff coming out of the government is quite scary. And I'll be happy to take some questions on that later. But you know, don't want to go into it now, it's run out of time. But most importantly, they're the people with the skills who help us to export our knowledge and freedoms across the world. And that's fundamental to the export side of things. People who will innovate and people who can help export. People like you, people with your lives in front of you that can be a force for good in the world. People who will generate the income to pay for their own salaries. The bureaucrats, on the other hand, you'll be paying for their salaries. So, they don't generate income, they just take from the tax that you pay. And all that tax is taken away from the stuff that you generate, stops you continuing to grow your own businesses and grow the things you're trying to achieve. These are the people that will reduce our national debt. Then there's the Remain camp. These are people who believe in controlling you. And make no mistake about that, that's what's going on. In Cyprus, when the Cypriot banks ran out of money, the European Parliament came in, took over their governance, and just said all the people now are going to have to pay to reduce that debt. Half the deposits in Cyprus were taken to reduce the National Bank of Cyprus's debts. They just took it away from them. It wasn't a decision taken by Cyprus, it was a decision taken by the European Union, these bureaucrats. I don't know if you've been watching what's happening in Greece, but it's absolutely terrifying. There's whole parts of Athens on fire every evening because people have got no jobs down there. They've got no jobs because of the way Europe has treated them. At the end of the Second World War, we bailed Germany out, and this isn't a Second World War argument, it's an economic argument, okay? We bailed Germany out from all their reparations, and through the American Marshall Plan, we helped them rebuild Germany. There was an opportunity to do that for Greece, and they just said no, they won't do it. They've left Greece in a terrible position, and the Greek people are, quite rightly very angry about this. There is this kind of just sit there and do as you're told approach to things. We make up the laws and go out and have the lunches. They want a monopoly and they want you to pay for it. They refuse to be accountable, preferring to take decisions behind closed doors. The whole point of democracy is that you have a say in what's happening. The decisions aren't taken on your behalf without you having a say. It's a really important factor. It's corrupt. Some 4% of the European budget disappears in corruption. In the UK, it's reckoned to be 0.4%. Okay, that's not a good number, but it's 10 times worse in the EC. That's pretty chronic, isn't it? The EC's accounts have not been signed off as giving a true and fair view for the last 20 years. They've never been signed off as being accurate. If you were a company, you'd be in prison as a director. You wouldn't be allowed to get away with it. So believe me, I no longer believe that these people have our interests at heart, only their own. They believe in building ever bigger bureaucracies, and it's that self-interest that's created this mess. These are the bureaucrats and the managers of very large organisations. So this is a little cartoon from a book I've written, which basically says, we don't talk to each other, our service is terrible, no one's accountable for anything, it's two businessmen talking to each other. The last new idea we had was a decade ago. The team in the US are incompetent and overpaid, and our monopoly in distribution excludes innovations coming into the market. Do you know what that means? It means that we're finally a global enterprise company, so they're proud of having achieved it, excluding all the innovation. I think this is one of the problems with bureaucrats, because they've never run a business. It's much easier for them to say no to everything. Okay? So they just stop everything happening. So they take all the money away and then stop you doing things. And I observe this happening left, right, and centre. I presented this to the lady who runs BIS. Now, BIS are the business information and skills, and the people who replace the TTR. So they're major government departments. And I showed them this cartoon saying, it's a really innovative approach. We can't consider it. It's never been done before. And there was a very ugly silence, and I thought, I've just upset someone very seriously. I shouldn't have done this. And the upshot of it was that she said, no, it's not that it's not funny there. It's that it's far too close to the truth. This is the woman who runs BIS for South East England. Okay? So it's even recognised in government at a government employee level, and that's exactly what's happening. But the outputs from this behaviour are not funny. We have about 10% youth unemployment in this country, something like that. Yeah? In France, it's 25% as the consequence of this. And this is you going out in the job market when you finish at Oaklands College, looking for a job, trying to do something. In Italy, 39%. In Spain, it's 45%. I was in Grenada in southern Spain about 2 years ago. The people in the cathedral there, adults who've been given coal mining jobs, who've lost their jobs. On hunger strike, you could see their ribs. You don't see this in the news, do you? It's all covered up, right? 52% youth unemployment in Greece. That's what they've done to Greece. Don't think it's not coming to you. You know, we may be the 5th biggest, but if we stick with this, there's every possibility it will happen. And this is the accountability point. Of those millions of job losses and the misery and heartache that that's caused to people, not one unaccountable bureaucrat in the European Commission's lost their jobs. They're all still sat there having lunches on our expenses. That's, this is democracy failing. So let's leave Europe and maintain accountability. So the other alternative is that do we sit in the camp and take back control of our destiny? We can back ourselves, not some unelected, unaccountable, visionless bureaucrats in Brussels who are destroying our freedoms. I made the point earlier about 50% of our laws. But I think the fundamental point is this, is that, and it's a long-standing historical difference, the French and the Germans believe that the people exist to serve the state, and they recognise this from Bismarck forwards. There's lots of stuff been written about it. And that's an ever closer union. It's people being more and more the same to serve this unaccountable bureaucracy that's taking the decisions for you, through which you have no choice. But we believe in this country the state exists to serve the people. That's the basis of democracy, it's the basis of accountability. It's the ability to say, when they're making a mess of it, we can get rid of them in 5 years. Yeah, at least have a new start. We have control over what's going on. So I ask you this question. Do you want to stay on this journey on an aeroplane with fundamental design faults and wait for the crash? Because there's a crash coming, and there's a lot of talk around the bad things if we leave. Okay? The bad things are coming either way, but they're going to be far less bad than the scaremongers suggest. And there's lots of people from Mervyn King. If you actually listen to Mark Carney, what he was saying, and you read the transcripts, he very clearly said George Osborne's interpretation of what I said, I'm distancing myself from, you know, it simply isn't true. A lot of people have described what's coming out in terms of scaremongering as a gross exaggeration of the facts. Right? So let's be clear about that. So you can stay on this aeroplane and wait for the crash, or we can work together to build a better aeroplane to travel all over the world. Because that's what's at stake on the 23rd of June. So I say, vote leave, vote for Brexit. Thank you very much indeed.
Who is a lady called Kate Godfrey, who's from the Stronger In campaign.
First of all, I must apologise for being late. As you may have heard, I went to your other campus. Now that's what happens when you're in the European Union. You become so excited about travel and about seeing the world and education that you drive half an hour away from where you're supposed to be. So thank you for your patience in waiting for me. And I have to say, I've never done a debate before where I haven't heard the other side of the argument, so this is going to be interesting. But the truth is that I think I can pretty much tell you what you've just heard without really worrying too much about it. I bet you've heard that the EU is really expensive. I bet you've heard about something called sovereignty and had a quiet moment where you thought, I'm not quite sure what this means or why it's so very, very important. And I'm prepared to bet that you've thought a little bit this morning, why am I here? Why are we having this referendum? Why have I been made to come into the hall and listen to these people? And there's a really good reason that we're having this referendum, actually. And one of those reasons is that it gives us a really good opportunity to sign people like you up to vote. Because it's really important that you get into the pattern of voting and you keep being a really active part of our democracy as you go through your lives. But whether we really want to come out of the European Union, whether this is really the decision that you want to make, not so much. So I'm going to start by asking everyone in this room who has a really clear idea, after my friend here, after his presentation, if you know exactly how he wants Britain to live, if you think you understand exactly how they're going to trade and work with the rest of the world after we come out of the European Union, can you raise your hand now? One person. You know, I've asked 11,215 people that question over the last month, and I've had 4 of them raise their hand, and the other 3 were Conservative MPs. And when I said, okay then, tell me, it turned out that they all had their own idea of what it might look like, and none of them agreed with the other. And so people like me, we're at the point now where we're saying, well look, things are working pretty well, actually. Our economy's growing, we're creating jobs, we're giving people a future, you're able to study overseas if you want. Things are working pretty okay. But now we're being asked to take the biggest political decision of my lifetime and your lifetime. We're being asked to change our country in such a fundamental way. And the guys who want us to change our country can't tell us how they want to change it. They can't tell us how they want it to look. So I was on a panel the other day with 3 MPs who were all for Brexit, all Conservative MPs. And we were asking them, let's pick one really important part of the European Union. Because we're part of the EU, Britain has access to the biggest market in the world. Everything that we make in Britain, we can sell in France and Germany and Spain and Greece without having to pay any taxes on the stuff that we take overseas. So that helps us to keep the prices of the things that we make in Britain affordable, and it helps us to sell more, and it helps us to create jobs. So that's pretty fundamental. And we asked them, so guys, are we going to try and stay part of that market, or are we going to start paying taxes on everything we export? First MP says, definitely coming out of the single market. We don't want any of that. We don't want people from Europe to be able to work here. We don't want the nurses at the local hospital who came from Romania. We don't want any of that stuff. Second person on the panel said, really want this, totally want this. We're going to stay in the single market. It's going to be amazing. They're going to come running and say, Britain, please sign an agreement that looks exactly like the agreement that we already have, except you won't be part of Europe. And the third one was like, well, I don't know, actually. I haven't really thought about it. If we haven't really thought about it, when we're a couple of weeks out from the big decision day, it's getting a little bit late. We had another example of this. Do you remember when President Obama came over? Do you remember how angry the Leave campaign were? The reason they were really angry is that for years, the people who wanted to leave the European Union have been saying, oh, well, we're going to sign a free trade agreement with the States, we're going to sell everything we make in Britain, we're going to ship it over to America, and it's going to be amazing, and we're all going to be much richer. 20 years, and they never actually bothered to get on a plane and ask the Americans what they thought about it. So eventually President Obama comes over here and says, guys, you know, it's really nice that you're thinking so much about me, but the truth is it takes years to sign these agreements. You guys have been trying to sign one for Canada for like 7 years, and you haven't got there yet. I can't make magic happen. And that's what the out campaign is, I'm afraid to say. It's what we call magical thinking. And if you want an example of that, when I started working on this campaign, when I started volunteering, because this is really important to me, everything that the out campaign talked about was the economy. I don't know if you remember, all the posters that you used to see would be about, oh, we send money to Europe. Well, we send money to Europe for a reason, which is that we have access to that biggest market in the world. All of the countries that are not part of the European Union but trade with the EU, they send money to. Norway, for example. But then suddenly they stopped talking about the economy. And we had a poster the other day that actually said, and this was produced by Leave.eu, said it's not the economy, stupid, it's about sovereignty. And I'm prepared to bet that you've heard quite a lot about sovereignty today. What's sovereignty? Put simply, it's using our power together. It's cooperating. And it's how international relations works. Now, before I did this kind of thing, before I came to speak to you, I used to work for an organisation called the United Nations, and we had a lot of treaty agreements. So what I did is I worked in Syria and I worked in refugee camps. And what Britain did is we agreed that we are stronger as a country when we work with the UN, when we work with NATO, the defence organisation, when we work with the European Union. And so we've agreed that we'll give some money to the UN every year. And in return for that, the UN runs the camps that I used to work in, where 6 million people who can't go home in Syria because of the war there, the terrible war in Syria, they are fed and looked after. And actually it's better to try and give people a life near to their country, because those are people who want to go home. And they're hoping that when the conflict ends, they can return to their communities and they can start their lives afresh. Now that delivery model is better run by an international organisation on the borders of Syria than it would be if the British government said, not interested, we'll put some money aside, we'll do something separately, but you know, that doesn't work. So when we talk about these international agreements, what we're doing is we're making a really practical decision to just be better at what we do. And you know, we are coming to the end of this campaign now. And frankly, I, probably like you, am getting to the point where I'm quite looking forward to the big day. And I'm really confident that we're going to decide to stay in the European Union. Why? Because it's a really big decision, and no one's been able to tell us how it makes us stronger. It's a really big decision, and no one's been able to tell us how it makes us safer to be not part of Europe. It's a really big decision, and every single international or independent forecast by economists, by mathematicians, by the people who know, every one of them has said, it's probably just not worth it, to be honest. No one's forecasting World War III. No one's saying it'll be the end of the world. We'll make it work. But the truth is that we get really good stuff out of Europe. And if people are trying to sell you London Bridge, normally the best answer is just to go, cheers, mate. I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. Right, now we're going to open up the floor for questions. So if you could raise your hand, I'll come and find you. If you can say your name and then who it is you want to speak to, so vote leave, vote stay, and then your question. So who has a question for me, please? Oh, come on, someone must have a question.
You get double points for being the first person brave enough to ask your question.
So, oh, well.
Staying in and staying out affecting the deficit and the health service. I mean, the health service is run by there's a lot of influence in the health service. So if you go out of Europe, how does that affect health service, education, and everything else?
I was discussing this with Peter Lilly recently, who is, interestingly enough, is the only existing MP who's...
I will take that
Do you want to speak a bit louder?
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. Well, I'll speak. No, that's fine. I was discussing this with Peter Lilly, who's the only MP who is an ex-trade minister and was involved in the single market negotiations. And he's very clearly of the view that if we don't pay this £10 billion in, and we'll come on to talk about the trade issue as well, it's about the balance of money, but the whole trade issue and this business of trade agreements counts about 2.5% if all of the sanctions were put against us, and the £10 billion is about 7%. So he says, whatever happens, you're better off out, then you can use the rest of that money to help support the health service. So yeah, it goes into Europe, disappears, it's gone. That's what the trade minister says.
I'm going to talk about a friend of mine that I was talking to the other day. He's a nurse up in Derbyshire, and she comes originally from Germany. She's lived in this country for 25 years. She's adopted 3 children here, and she's not quite sure what her future is, or whether she's going to be able to work here. Our NHS is absolutely dependent on the people who come here to work. My local hospital recruits every year in Europe, and you know what? It's because governments haven't been good enough. We've cut the number of nurses that we used to train every year for a really long time. But it's simply really hopeful to say, oh well, we'll magically find 40,000 nurses from somewhere. We'll magically find 150,000 European nationals who help to keep my nan in the local care home, to look after my dad when he had a heart attack. And you know, it's one thing to talk about trade ministers, but we probably want to listen to the guy who runs the NHS. And the guy who runs the NHS is called Simon Stevens. Now, look up the interview that he did last weekend, where he said there's no upside here. There is no good outcome for the NHS or for education if we come out of the European Union. Because not only are we going to have much less money as a country, and the forecasts are between 3% and 6% less money, but no forecast says we'll have more money. But the NHS is so dependent on people to keep it going that we would really struggle. So these things are really important. We're talking about public services. These are the things that matter to us every day, and the risks that we're taking. And to date, as far as I know, there hasn't been any doctor in Parliament who said this is a good idea. And I'd refer my friend to one of his colleagues, Sarah Williston, who's been a fantastic chair of what we call the Health Committee in Parliament. And she won't give out leave leaflets anymore because she says that they're just not telling the truth about the NHS. And she's really angry about it because as a doctor, she's sworn to provide care to people. And for someone like Sarah Wollaston to say, I'm so angry about these claims that the NHS could be made stronger that I'm not going to be part of this campaign anymore, I think that's a really significant intervention from someone who used to be on his side of the argument.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just come back, there's a number of statements that Kate's made, which I just don't agree with.
I said that they were accurate.
I'm not sure. This idea that we're going to be far worse off if we go out, you know, Mark Carney has, who's the current governor of the Bank of England, who's put all these various stats together. So Mark Carney, who's the current... Is that better? Switch on.
It's on.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Hello? Is that better?
I'll just speak loudly. There's Mark Carney, who's the current governor of the Bank of England, has produced some numbers on behalf of government, which do show these figures. That when he was interviewed quite strongly in the recent inflation statement, he clearly admitted that all of his projections were based upon a Remain scenario. He hadn't looked at all at anything beyond 2 years, even though the government's talking about 10-year extensions to these things. And they hadn't looked at all about the upside of an exit scenario. So all of the government figures are not based on the truth. Now, just coming back to this issue around the health service, you know, my friend Neil, that I referred to earlier, head of health for West Midlands, guy who stopped nurses getting fired for whistleblowing on doctors, he's been at the front end of trying to deal with the health service for 20 years, all his life. He's a top psychiatrist in the country. He is firmly behind exit because he wants to get away from the amount of bureaucracy that's going on in the health service. And many of the doctors, as I've said to you, my father is one of them, it's very clear that back in the good old days when doctors were running things, it ran well, and now it's being run by lots of people that don't know how to take those decisions. It's not run nearly so well, and it's very expensive. So, you know, that's what's going on in the health service.
I was just going to say that surely the NHS started before we even joined the EU, and it was very, very effective.
Absolutely.
Why should it change? It seems that it's got worse.
It has got much worse. Yeah.
I think we should probably try and keep it to one answer to every question, otherwise we're not going to be able to get many questions. But I did just hear a complaint that the government haven't been making your side of the argument. The government...
I said Mark Carney hadn't considered it.
Oh, sorry, the Bank of England hasn't been doing my friend's job and he's really cross about it?
No, I'm not cross about it. So what I'm saying is that the government is basing its figures on the banking figures which haven't taken into account half the story.
So my question to you is why haven't you done that? Why haven't you given us the book of how this works? Why have you accepted the Treasury figures when the Treasury, Bank of England, when they said this would cost every household in Britain £4,300 by 2030, why didn't your campaign say, well, I don't like those figures, let me use others? Why did you start using them? Okay. You know, you can't have a both ways.
So let me ask you a question in return. Your positioning is one of, we haven't made clear what's going to happen in the future in something which we don't yet know the answer to. The existing status quo has been doing it for years, and it's a horrible mess. So that's why.
So next question, I think.
Next question. Who's got another question?
I think the battery's gone on that mic. Just speak up, the mic's not working.
I was doing a technology degree.
Yeah.
The government funding was cut.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to find it very hard to get a job. So I have to go abroad.
Yeah.
How will that affect if I leave and I do abroad?
Okay.
Should we take it?
Yeah, no, please go first. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is a really, really important point because the people who are actually going to be affected most by Brexit, there's a belief that it's students, it's a belief that it's people at university. It's not. It's people who are aged now between 16 and 18. not only are you going to have to live with the impact of Brexit for potentially your whole lives, but over the years we've cut funding for this part of education most, and actually the EU is picking up on keeping further education colleges sustainable, and that's the reason why more than 90% of university vice-chancellors and more than 80% of the heads of this kind of college who we polled have said we think it's really important for the opportunity of our students that we should be able to stay in and we should be able to deliver things like the programmes that allow you, as I did when I was your age, to go and study overseas and actually potentially to save a lot of money by doing so. Now when we come on to jobs, there are 3 million jobs in Britain that are associated with our membership of the EU. There are 1 million jobs that are directly dependent on our relationship with the EU. I live next to an airport that only flies to Europe. 25% of the people in my village, in my town, work at that airport in freight, in mail handling, and if we bring customs back, which is what they're talking about, we would have to, we also bring back the taxes that I talked about, which are called tariffs. And the problem is that no one's saying they're going to be particularly high, like maybe 5%, maybe 3%, but they can go up to 30% on some goods that we currently have tariffs on. And the problem is, if you're a British worker and you just want to sell what you're making overseas, and suddenly the price difference is going to be 5% or 3%, if you want to buy whatever's being sold in Germany or France, suddenly you're going to go, well, but you know, I wanted to buy a car, I was going to buy a British car, but it's 5% more expensive compared to a car that's made around the corner than me. And actually, that's a lot of money. So these are the day-to-day decisions that start being affected. And you know where I'm from? We've got a big Toyota factory. And the Toyota factory's got 2 lines on it, 2 production lines. One of them makes what's called the Avensis, and that goes out of production in 2017. At that point, Toyota, like every car manufacturer in the UK, every car manufacturer, 300,000 jobs in the car industry, they've all said they really want to stay in Europe. Why? Because Toyota have spent hundreds of millions of pounds on building that factory near my house. They've brought thousands of jobs to a community that used to be really poor. But the problem is Toyota have got shareholders. And Toyota, thinking about pension funds, own Toyota. And Toyota have to explain why, if Britain comes out of the European Union, why they would choose to stay if that means that they then can't sell the cars they're making in Derby as easily in Toulouse or in Paris or in Frankfurt. And you know, in my spare time, I'm a student at Nottingham University. We've got £500 million worth of trade has come into this country from the aerospace industry that's around that university, from the really smart knowledge economy that people in Britain have helped to create. We sell our brains overseas a lot of the time. And the professors there are really worried because they're already working on planes that are made a little bit in Toulouse and they're made a little bit in Berlin and then they come and they're finished in Britain. If we start to break up those relationships, if we turn our back on those relationships and those partnerships that we have with universities overseas, it becomes so much more difficult. And you know what, I said magical thinking? This is where you really start to see the magical thinking with the European campaign, with the Brexit campaign, because they'll say, oh, none of this matters, oh, none of it's real, it'll be fine, but they can never explain to you why someone in Germany would want to spend more for a car that they could buy and spend the money on something else. That's economics, for example.
Some very good points there. Can I answer your question, which was around the criminology scenario and funding coming in? I think it's a very good point in terms of there is quite a lot of European funding coming in to help people with research, to help universities going on. There's a whole range of stuff that's happening. Okay? I'm on the board for the Local Enterprise Partnership for Innovation, and I've looked at the contracts, I've seen what happens. And the reality is that we send X amount of money over to Europe, we get X minus 40% or whatever the number is back, which is then put into whatever these schemes are. And it comes with all kinds of strings attached. And it's a complete nightmare. It's just more and more bureaucracy. It's more evidence of people starting to do things. So my argument is very clear, is whatever the money is that is available, there'd be more money available. We hadn't spent half of it on European bureaucracy. Now, there is a secondary question, and I think it's a very valid one, which was if Europe were not looking after our interests in this way, which they may or may not be doing, then would a British government make sure that money, with more money available, came directly to the causes that you would like it to? Now, that's a fair question. The difference is that if they don't, we can unelect them, and I will certainly come and join you on the barricades if they start spending it on something else. Okay? So that would be the first point. The second point around airports, if I can just address that. My advertising agency, when I was in my 20s, funnily enough, branded Gatwick as London Gatwick. You know, we were the first of the London Stansted, London, whatever they were. And I can absolutely tell you, we turned Sussex around as an employment black spot. Sussex was in the same kind of area as Glasgow at the time, with massive unemployment down there. And what turned Gatwick around wasn't short-haul flights to Paris or the Chelsea airport stuff coming back from Iron Napa. It was people flying in from Japan. It was people coming in from the States. It was trade coming in from all over the world, and it converted Sussex. You know, let's recognise that we are a massive trading nation and we need to trade with the whole world. You know, the final point here, which I keep hearing from the Remain campaign, is some kind of implication that if we leave Europe, all the things we're doing at the moment, they're going to stop. Does anyone think that's going to happen on the 24th of June? All of these things are going to stop? You know, why do they keep telling you this? It's an absolute nonsense. It simply isn't true. I don't know why they keep saying it. I'm highly suspicious of the motives of this. Yeah.
Could I just pick you up on the gap? Could I just pick you up on the gap? I fly from Gatwick a lot. Most of the planes are EasyJet, which go to Europe.
Yeah.
There's very few that go international now from Gatwick. So that's not strictly true.
Well, yeah. And certainly, BAA are all about having high net worth individuals coming through. So we bought those routes in. Maybe they're going elsewhere, but it is the case.
Next question. Who wants to go next?
Lady at the back here. Do you want to stand up? I'm so sorry. Please.
Can you just elaborate a little bit about travel within the EU? It's going to be quite easy to travel throughout Europe. I know that you need a visa to travel abroad. In my way, when it's in Hungary, how easy would it be to travel to those countries and stay there for,
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as I'm aware, that has still to be sorted out. The idea around border controls, which is another thing about which Kate made the point about there not being enough people coming in. The point about the travel control is that the people that want to travel and we feel comfortable can travel should be able to. The people that we want to come in should be able to, a bit like the Australian system. But I just don't see a situation where we have a trade deficit with Germany of £80 billion a year. Yeah? They import £80 billion more stuff into us than we export to them. So if anyone starts playing tariff games or stopping people travelling around the place, they're going to lose. So they're just not going to do it. They'd be mad. I mean, we are the biggest export market for Europe. That's just how it is. So again, all this scaremongering that says it's going to be this problem and that problem, the next problem, I simply don't think it's going to happen. Mervyn King described all of these scenarios that they're describing as a gross exaggeration. He's the old ex-government Bank of England. Yeah? So I don't think it's going to change on the 24th of June. So believe me. Yeah, well, hopefully that we've made much easier.
Okay, let's have, at the risk of being slightly rude, let's have one last little chapter of economics for dummies, and then we'll move on to some of the other things that are really important. And frankly, what a fantastic question. How interesting that your mum lives in Portugal, your boyfriend from Hungary, you're studying Britain. That's fantastic. So none of this is going to happen. It's not how life works. Let me tell you how life works, right? If we step away from the European Union, if we come outside these trade barriers, we have to bring customs back, we have to bring visas back, and that's what his campaigns say. Why do we have to do that? Because, for example, a lot of stuff is made in China, very cheaply, very cost effectively. What happens in a situation where goods are moved from China to Britain, and then we can move them on if we signed a new free trade agreement into Europe without paying taxes on them? That means that we could sell things from China that have been made really cheaply, and we could undercut the prices of everything in Europe. So that's not allowed under the international law. We don't gamble with people's jobs in that way. We have this system of international trade because it protects us and it protects Europe. And I'm afraid the idea that every government in Europe will just forget that that's how life works and just magically say, it's fine, we'll just make it work for you guys, is crazy. Now, if you've ever seen, who's here has seen French farmers on the news getting in their tractors outside McDonald's going, you know, we demand a bit more help. That's what economics is. It's people's lives. It's just them trying to get along on a day-to-day basis. And what the ad campaign are is they're asking us to be really irrational. They're asking us to make our decisions against our best interests. And so frankly, that's not what happens. And I have every sympathy for you, I really do, because my dad lives in France. He retired there because he has a long-term illness and he really needs the sunshine, frankly. And actually, my dad retired out there and he promptly had a heart attack and he spent 6 months in a really fantastic French hospital. Now, my dad's retired now, he doesn't work anymore. He's too old and he's too ill to go back to work. If we come out of Europe, the chances are, I mean, there's been no answers, but realistically, my dad's not going to have his E111 card anymore. He's not going to have access to free French healthcare. And the reality for my family is that everything that dad's built up over a lifetime, he's put into a house that he's built and that he rents out over the summer. And I love my dad dearly, but I want him to come back to Britain because he wants to spend time with me, not because he needs to be a patient in the NHS again, and not because he can't afford to live overseas anymore. And there are 1 million people who are in that situation. Every one of us has got family overseas. Every one of us at some point will have a boyfriend in Hungary, or go to university in Berlin, or do Erasmus, or travel, or frankly, just go down the local airport and get a flight for 30 quid and go and spend a week overseas. And all of that should be easy, and it is easy because we're part of Europe. So why throw that away?
Can we have one more question? One last.
Very quickly.
One answer question. Sorry, one answer question. Sorry. One final question before we do one last. What's happening? So, right, one at the back there. The mic's working again now. Let's do this.
One question, just talking about, I mean, I see both sides of the argument. You know, it's very difficult, and part of me feels about who thinks that we want to be European or not. And actually, I don't know that we can predict what will happen either way. We didn't predict the global disaster economically we had in the last, that all these kids are having to deal with. But luckily, we all got mates on the bottom, and I'm truly believe in that. But one thing I have heard that concerns me about the future of Europe is this trade agreement with the Americans that seems to be flushing out there. None of us have heard about it before. That might change our whole perception of trade with Europe. I don't really understand it, but you are able to explain it a bit more?
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to go first on that. So, I always finish my speeches, or ordinarily, I'm a bit less rushed. I finish by saying it's not my job to say Europe's perfect. You know, I'm not here. There are some things about Europe that I don't think work brilliantly. For example, I'm from the East Midlands, where we have about MEPs, the people who are responsible for democracy in Europe. We've got 4 out of 5 are UKIP, and they just don't want to be there. So the people that we're trusting at the moment to be our voice in Europe are clear that they don't want to do their jobs. That's not going to work. But that's also not the question on the ballot paper. And for anyone who is undecided at this point, it's really important to remember what we're being asked. We're not being asked, do you love Europe? Do you want to move to France? Do you know, how important is it to you? What we're being asked is Britain stronger, safer, and better off in Europe? And the answer on balance, for people who are undecided, we are seeing a real swing towards, yes it is. And now to deal with your point on the trade agreement, it's actually really interesting because that's my background. My mum is a cancer patient, and I was a candidate at the last election, and our local hospital was being privatised. So it was the biggest NHS privatisation in history. It was £1 billion of cancer and end-of-life care, and it was being made available to private companies. Now, the agreement that we have aims to kind of promote those agreements, so every contract should be, American companies should be able to bid on it, and we should be able to sell into America. So where I'm from, the biggest industry is called potteries because we make pots. At the moment, everything we sell into America has up to a 28% tax on it. So for my area, that free trade agreement is worth about 3,000 jobs, we think, just in the area around me. It's worth £1.5 billion every year to the British economy. So we have to be really balanced. There'll be good things about it and there'll be bad things about it. But the out campaigns say that it makes the health service, for example, open to American medical companies coming here. The truth is that I'm the only person in Britain that spent 3 years actually looking at the detail of that agreement and being part of it and going to court to talk about how it works. And I really support that free trade agreement. Why? Because the stuff that didn't work about it, we fought it locally. We turned around to our local MP and said, we don't want that. And this is a really good example of how our relationship with Europe works. Now, I think we all know why Boris Johnson is leading the out campaign. He's leading the out campaign because he sat down on Friday and he wrote one article that said, I really love Europe, I've always loved Europe. And he wrote one article that said, I don't like Europe, I'd like to be the next Prime Minister. And then he went back to the Houses of Parliament and he talked to all the Conservative MPs who might get the chance to nominate him to be the next, potentially the next Prime Minister, and said, if I back coming out of Europe, will you support me? And enough people said yes. And on Sunday he published the article that said, can't bear Europe, never liked Europe. Now Boris is the guy who's been responsible as a journalist for a lot of the myths about Europe, all this crazy stuff we hear about, they don't like straight bananas and all things like that. And I'm good friends with a guy called Ken Clark, who's another Conservative MP, but who backs Europe. And he went up to Boris afterwards and said, okay mate, name the one law that you want to change if we come out of Europe. Just pick one right now. Name a law that we haven't decided we wanted in Britain, that we haven't what we call gold-plated, that we haven't chosen to accept from Europe. And you know what? Boris couldn't answer that question then, and he still can't answer it weeks later. So it's very easy to take something that we're negotiating, it's very easy to take an agreement and to claim all sorts of things about it that are simply not supported in reality. But the truth is, it's very difficult to think of anything that comes from Europe that we haven't picked to have in this country. It's exactly the same with TTIP. The Out campaign have been really clear that if we don't sign as part of Europe, they want to have that trade agreement anyway, but then we'd be negotiating it as a country of 70 million people instead of as a bloc of 500 million people, and I'm afraid that just means we'll get a worse deal all around.
Yeah, just coming back on your question about trade agreements, I think one of the things to understand about trade agreements is I think this has been blown enormously out of proportion. So what trade agreements try to do is they try to make sure that all the plumbing bits fit together and the car bits, so that when you're going into 28 different countries, you haven't got to be able to produce 28 different bits and bobs. Yeah? So 28 different products for the manufacturing side of things. But the fact that you have a trade agreement somewhere is mainly about the standards associated with those bits. It doesn't stop somebody from outside coming in. It's a benefit to other people. Anybody can, if you're living in France and I want to sell you something, the trade agreement doesn't come into it. I just get in touch with you, we agree a price, and we get on with it. That's how 99% of businesses are all the way around the world. So the whole trade agreement thing is blown seriously out of proportion, is my belief. I don't, I've been in business since I was 25, and I'm 55 now, so 30 years. And I've traded all around the world, and I've never come across a trade agreement getting in the way of that taking place. I come across customs guys playing various bits and bobs, but it's not been a problem for me or the vast majority of people that I'm aware of. Okay? So that's just speaking as a business person who's been on the front line all that time. I think, just in summary, we've heard today quite a lot of stuff about all the potential downsides from the people who are responsible for and have had the opportunity to solve these problems for years and years and years. The fact of the matter is that they're not solved. There are clear problems there. We know there are problems there. We look out the window and we see them every day. So I think, and then the main reason against that's been given not to leave is uncertainty of the future. Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is broke. Let's take the opportunity to fix it. And it's kind of as simple as that. It's the difference between us being able to do things for ourselves and take control of our own destiny and having these decisions taken by other people. And the reason why the French farmers are on strike and are blocking all the roads up and are blocking up northern France so that no one can import or export anything is because none of the bureaucrats listen to them. That's why, there's no accountability. So out of sheer frustration, they just grind everything to a halt. And that's the problem, that's the essence of it. So, you know, please, 23rd, I hope you know what to do. Thank you very much indeed.
Right, thank you, Gary. I just want to do one last exercise, and I'd like to say thank you to both our speakers, but also, can I give you 20 seconds each to just conclude and close with, I'll start with Kate, why we should stay in Europe.
Why should we stay in Europe? Because I'd like to come back in 20 years and hear who now has a boyfriend in Hungary, who's living in Poland, who's moved to France, who's got a fantastic job, who's travelled the world, who's had an exciting big future that you should have and you can vote for.
Yeah, it's very simple. Let's take back control of what we're doing. It's as simple as that. Let's not leave it to these guys that, you know,